Hello again, I'm Kathy Kuntz with Cool Choices, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on the power of social cues as a way to create a culture of sustainability. So, Cool Choices is a Wisconsin-based nonprofit, and we work with businesses, local units of government, and even whole communities to accelerate sustainability initiatives by inspiring individuals to be part of the solution. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but mostly today I want to talk about the power of social cues as maybe a bit more background. My own history is I spent about 2 decades in the traditional energy efficiency realm and really became obsessed with human behavior and how we get people involved in these sustainability initiatives more effectively. So that brought me to Cool Choices and certainly brings me to today's topic, because one of the most effective ways we influence what folks do is through social cues. And by social cues, I mean the human interactions we have with each other, whether that's words certainly, but also expressions and gestures and tone, all the ways that we signal to each other what to do and not to do in particular situations. And I want to distinguish these social things from some of the other ways that we think of influencing folks, particularly in groups, and I'd call them institutional cues. So the signage in your lobby that talks about your organizational values, or a printed report, or a billboard kind of thing. Those are cues, but they're much less powerful than the social cues we give one another. And I guess the best example I can give you of this is my own experience this week at the gym. So at my gym there are signs about not dropping weights, as there are in many gyms. I saw the other day though, someone did drop weights and someone else said to them, "We don't drop weights here." And that was much more effective as a cue to, hey, this is how we behave in this particular place, than the signs have ever been for folks. And, you know, there's that way, you think about interacting with your friends. Okay, you interact with your friends in a variety of settings. There are all kinds of social cues that are telling you how to behave, say, at a wedding versus a Packers game kind of thing. So thinking about really want you to think about how social cues influence behavior and what that means for you as a sustainability advocate when you're thinking about influencing the behavior of whole groups of colleagues or community members. You know, how do you leverage those social cues? Because of course, what we want to see, this is a quote from a past partner of ours, Morgan Wiswall, who talks about how he got to a place where the entire employee population was moving in the same direction. So people were reinforcing each other. There was a culture now where this is how we do things. This is how we talk about things. This is the efforts we reinforce with each other. And that's super powerful. That's probably the place where we all want to be relative to sustainability. How do we get everybody facing in the same direction and doing the things we want? And ironically, this is what we want, but very often we start out in exactly the opposite place. Time and again, I see examples where folks use really negative data to try to influence the result they want. And perhaps because as sustainability professionals, we're really taken aback by some of these statistics and assume other people will be motivated by them, which isn't accurate. So when I say to someone that 9 out of 10 plastic water bottles are not recycled, for the average person, what that means is almost everyone is not recycling water bottles. Does it really matter if I recycle this one? Do I want to be part of the norm? What I'm essentially saying with these negative statements is everybody like you does this bad thing. There is actually research showing that you know, some of these campaigns where you're throwing out dramatic steps get more people to do the negative behavior. Saying that everyone leaves the lights on in the office tells everyone to leave the lights on in the office. You're creating a social norm that's exactly the one you don't want. So we want you to think about the cues you're sending to folks, and essentially, instead of talking about the negative, think about how you can catch people doing the right things. So Bill walks away from his computer and turns off the monitor. How do you catch him doing that? And it's really important to catch him and then celebrate that and do that in a sincere way. So if your instinct is to go, man, I can't believe you finally turned something off, Bill, that is not a good effective social cue. What you want is to really celebrate this in a very genuine way. Thanks for doing that. Great for you to do that for us. And I want to walk through kind of the mechanics of what happens when you catch people doing the right things and celebrate them, how positive reinforcement pays off. So essentially, first you recognize Tom for following the recycling protocols, for taking a minute to put things in the right bin. When you do that, there's sort of two reinforcements that happen. Alice sees Tom get that recognition and is influenced because she wants recognition too. For Tom, the fact that you noticed what he was doing and you've now called attention to it makes it really important for him at an individual level to keep doing that activity, because now he sort of has to live up to the reputation you gave him. So you've got Alice and Tom doing things, and then the replication can really build from there. You know, you're giving kudos to Tom and Alice for what they're doing, and Jim and Dwayne start making a better effort to recycle too, because they see that momentum and they want that recognition too. And the cues are there that these are the things that are valued. These are the things that people get kudos for. How do I become part of that group? I'm going to give you two examples of this, and really thinking about how you give people recognition and doing that in a way that doesn't necessarily involve handing out cash. So one of the challenges, and I alluded to this a little bit before, that we see in a lot of organizations is as simple as, do people turn off their monitors or their computers when they're leaving at the end of the day? And you know, there's new research out that a typical office cubicle is approaching the electric usage of a residential refrigerator. You know, as our monitors get bigger, and now most people have two, we're really talking about significant electric consumption at the cubicle level. So how do you get people to turn those off? And again, very often the first response is those sort of angry emails saying, none of you are turning off your monitors, which we just talked about won't work. Instead of that, my sort of go-to solution for this is you buy a bag of candy. And one morning you come in early and you go around, and you, at any desk where the equipment is off the way you want it to be, whether that's monitors off and computers on because there are overnight updates, or everything off, whatever it is, you leave candy on the keyboards of the folks whose machines are appropriately off. No notes, nothing, candy. What will happen is there will be discussion as people come into the office, buzz around why some people got candy and why some people didn't get candy. Maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, send out an email saying, kudos to the folks who had their computers off last night. I really appreciate it. I left them a thank you this morning. So you've got that sort of conversation that happens then. But then part of what happens there, and I've seen this in our own organization, you'll have staff who are nudging other staff about this. I have a developer who becomes very concerned that other people might not get candy if I randomly have candy available after some workshop, and I'm happy about who has their computers off. And so he'll be always on the way to meetings, nudging people, hey, make sure your computer's off. Kathy might have candy. Those are the social cues that are really sticky in an organization. And it's not that you're giving candy all the time. These are random kind of rewards. But you are giving that recognition and celebrating what people are doing. Right, let me give you another kind of interesting. This is one of my favorite stories of positive reinforcement. So I got this from a social marketing professor who'd worked with a group in Ohio, in rural Ohio, on traffic safety kinds of issues. And so at the high school in this rural Ohio community, as is the case in lots of rural communities, most of the students drove themselves to school. And so at the end of the day, there's this parade of students leaving in their vehicles. And one day there's a police officer at the school parking lot who very quickly pulls over one of the students leaving the building. Now, of course, you can imagine everyone else drives by and sees Billy pulled over by the cop. I think this story predates social media. Today it would mean that there was, you know, a firestorm on social media about what happened to Billy by the time Billy gets home. Well, so the gist is, though, Billy gets home and immediately gets a phone call from one of his friends to find out how big of a ticket he got. And Billy says, "Oh, I didn't get a ticket. The officer noticed I was wearing my seatbelt, so he stopped me to thank me and to give me some free movie passes." A very public social cue reinforcing a particular behavior. And the reports were that you know, officers made very few stops at that high school, but dramatically changed seatbelt usage, because it became this very public kind of recognition cue. And really, I urge you to think about, so how in your own organization do you get to the place where you use positive reinforcement like that? Part of it is really channeling everyone in the workforce. The reality is everyone on your team today has a high-quality camera in their pocket on their phone. Encouraging people to catch other people doing the right things, snapping a photo, and then sharing those photos back with you so you can put them on the intranet, so you can use them at staff meetings, whatever sort of the right venue is for you, is a really powerful way to build those recognition points and to give people those social cues about what we value here and what we really want to see more of. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're identifying opportunities to celebrate the bright spots, and then you're getting really clear cues. That's a terrific thing you did, and we want to see more people do that. And by doing those two things, you really can accelerate your sustainability efforts. People start to see that this is embedded in our culture. This is a real thing that we value. And ultimately, that's the core of what we do at Cool Choices. So we happen to use an online platform. We go into organizations and have colleagues form teams, and over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, they report their daily sustainable practices, and they earn points, and they get they can win some random prizes. And through this transparent system, ultimately what they're doing is they're celebrating the sustainable practices of their colleagues, and they're having all kinds of conversations about that. They're collaborating on how they can get points for carpooling. They're sharing funny photos of Ed in accounting out doing composting with his dog. There are all these things that are ultimately social cues about who we are and what we value that they're accumulating together as part of this. So that's kind of the gist of what we do, and if you're interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to chat with you more. We try to keep these webinars pretty short and kind of on one topic, and so I'm going to open it up now to questions. You've got this GoToWebinar sidebar panel that you can hit the little orange arrow to open the panel, and you'll have a spot there where you can enter questions if you've got a question for me about what we've talked about today in terms of social cues, how you can apply social cues in your own organization. I'm happy to answer those questions. Someone is asking why social cues are so much more effective than institutional ones, because obviously I think we all think, you know, it would be really nice if you could hang a sign and everyone would recycle appropriately, or posting a sign got everyone to stop idling outside the local elementary school. The reality is that we have a kind of limited capacity to absorb all the information out there telling us all the things we should be doing all the time. But human beings are really social creatures. And so when other people interact with me and say, this is valuable to me, I think people should do this, that is really influential. And it turns out the social pieces of this, knowing what other people are doing, hearing what other people value, certainly having people, and particularly people I know, people I think are like me, recommend a particular course of action over another course of action, are really powerful ways to influence our behavior. So always I want you to think about, well, how do I make this more social? How do I leverage people talking to each other about the things I want them talking to each other about? Oh, which maybe led to this other, me saying that might have led to this other question here, which is about, so what happens with the people who are reinforcing negative social cues? So as I'm reading this, I'm picturing the person, when you're talking about the new recycling protocols, who's rolling his or her eyes in the back row and making comments. You know, one of the things we find really effective in our programs is trying to engage those folks. In every organization, there are opinion leaders, and very often opinion leaders aren't just people with titles. Opinion leaders are people other people listen to in the lunchroom. And so if you've got a group of people who command that respect, getting them involved in what you're doing and having them help influence others is enormously powerful. Those are the folks who are going to be most effective delivering social cues. And so really thinking about how do you make something appealing and interesting and fun for those folks. We've been in organizations where leadership was very forthright with some of those opinion leaders, saying, you are opinion leaders, we need your help shifting culture around these things. And you see people sit up a little straighter, go, yeah, people do listen to my opinion. Okay, how am I going to use that for good? So I think there are ways to engage that, and certainly we could talk more offline about the particulars of it. It's not always possible, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to really turn some of that momentum into something really positive for an organization. And with that, I am not seeing more questions at this point, so I am going to wish you a good day then. You will get a copy of the recording if you want to share it with other folks. You've got my email if you have other questions later or want to learn more about what we do. And in the meantime, I wish you well using social cues to facilitate a culture of sustainability. Thanks so much for joining me today. Bye.